With a little over 3 weeks before Election Day here in BC, we're checking in with CBC hosts across our great big province to hear what issues are top of mind for voters in their areas, including the province's southern interior. And that's where we find Chris Walker, host of Daybreak South in Kelowna. Chris, appreciate you doing this. What are some of the major issues that are dominating Kelowna, the greater Okanagan, and your listener area?
Well, they're pretty similar to issues in the rest of BC. This won't be a surprise. Housing and the cost of living, access to healthcare, the related issues of the opioid crisis and homelessness. There is an urban-rural divide that's growing even within this region, and that might make the issues a little different in Kelowna than in rural areas, and it changes the electoral politics, which we'll talk about in a moment. So let's start with housing. Nothing new for people in the Lower Mainland, but what's happened, Dan, since the pandemic is that people have left the Lower Mainland looking for cheaper housing. They found it here, but the problem has hitched a ride, and the demand here has been very high for 4 or 5 years. We talked to a family on our show. Their rent has doubled in 6 years. Their rent, of course, has doubled, but their income hasn't changed. Now, they live downtown. So like most people in cities, they're a little more liberal. They're looking for non-market solutions in this election, co-op housing, subsidized housing, things like that. You might find different ideas in the suburbs or in rural areas where people are more conservative. So they're looking for things like tax credits, more freedom for short-term rentals, maybe lower fees for construction, those sorts of things. Now, lately in Kelowna, the rent has been falling slightly. The vacancy rate's gone up a bit. The NDP could try to take some credit for that, but people I talk to are frustrated, and frustration tends to favor the opposition. So that's housing. On healthcare, I think this is where the Conservatives have a bigger advantage. My sense is that unlike housing, driven by market forces, people lay the responsibility for healthcare directly at the feet of government. And so there's quite a bit of support here for more private solutions. There are more people here with a higher net worth. More of them are older, some of them from Alberta. The Okanagan is a place of free enterprise, so things like socialized medicine, they're viewed already with some skepticism, right? And that increasingly appeals to a younger conservative crowd here too. Now that's interesting. It's interesting because that doesn't necessarily translate to the opioid crisis. There are some loud voices further on the right, maybe, but the people I talk to, including conservatives, sometimes especially conservatives, they want more intervention by government on that particular problem, more treatment, more recovery, more programs. And this is where I think independent candidates, former BC United candidates, might be able to pick up some votes. People who kind of lean to the right but don't like John Rustad's rhetoric on the drug crisis, see this more as a healthcare issue and want bold but real centrist intervention.
You mentioned BC United. Let's dive into a bit of history here. The Kelowna area was once the BC Liberal stronghold. With United's implosion, what's the feeling for voters there now?
Well, a stronghold is an understatement. Remember when Christy Clark couldn't win in Point Grey, the party looked for the safest seat in the land. It was here. But Dan, that was then. This is now. It is a different time. All over the world, conservative politics have changed, right? And it's no different here. The old conservative tradition in this valley, like the loafer-wearing Chamber of Commerce, church-going types, that's giving way. In its place, a right wing that's more strident, influenced by American politics, influenced by social media, the anti-vaccine movement as well. And my sense is that they're pretty motivated to own the libs, as it were, to vote against any liberal cause. And if they can't right now vote against Trudeau, they're happy enough to vote against David Eby. And polls suggest that BC United's support is peeling off toward the Conservatives. Maybe not a surprise, but the Conservatives are poised to reap those rewards here.
Yeah. And lastly, we appreciate your time. Quite a few independents running. What are their chances in the Okanagan?
Well, if history is our guide, their chances are slim. There's about a 1% success rate for independent candidates in BC elections. There's only one BC United candidate that's an incumbent in the Southern Interior, now an independent, of course. So most of them were new anyway. They now find themselves without a party, without name recognition. So these are conservative ridings to lose. The hitch here could be vote splitting. There are urban ridings, Kelowna, Vernon especially, where there's enough NDP support that a split vote could lead to NDP wins. There's always an outside chance as well that well-known independents could do well, even win. I mentioned Tom Shapitka in the East Kootenay, some others to watch. Kevin Acton, popular mayor in the North Okanagan. Stephen Johnson on the west side of Kelowna. Christy Clark's old riding. So it's a short list, and Dan, it's a tall order.
Chris Walker, host of Daybreak South, we appreciate your time and your analysis. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Dan.